Welcome back to the channel. We're going to do the front rotors on this Ford Expedition EL. We got a video for the back one. We're going to do a video for this front one real quick, and we're going to start it right now. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Front rotors. Have a video on this truck already about the back rotors. It is a little bit different on the front, so we're going to get into it and I'll show you how I do it. Always check your service manuals with your specifications for each vehicle that you do, for torque specs, things like that. Don't copy what I do because it might be specific to this vehicle and may not apply to yours. So if it doesn't apply to yours, then you'll be messing up. Check all that stuff. These are not how-to videos, these are how I do it. So here I go. Just like in the other video, these are 21 millimeters. You don't want to over torque them. 150 foot-pounds. For this particular model, it's 2012. That's what they recommend. Alright, tires off. And we'll bring you in here real close to let you have a good bird's eye view of exactly what's going on, and I will try to do my best to give you sizes, dimensions, and all that good stuff. Here we go. Alright guys, check this out. Here's just in case for somebody brand new to any kind of automotives. This is your brake caliper. This is your brake caliper bracket. This is your rotor. Your hub's behind the rotor. So these are 13 millimeter on this particular truck, which is different than the back. Remember, if you watch the video for the back rotors or the back caliper coming off, you'll know that that's a 7 millimeter Allen head. Well, these up front are actual bolt heads. So we're going to try to get these off real quick, remove the caliper, and then we'll get to trying to get the bracket off. I've got my 13 millimeter wrench on here. Now this is a little unorthodox, but I use a rubber mallet a lot on these things. As long as you know for sure you're going the right direction, it's not a big deal. You don't want to be going the wrong direction when you're doing this. But I'm loosening this off, and sometimes it's just easier for me to just lightly tap it than it is for me to bust a knuckle, or, you know. And there's other tricks too. I don't know, putting two wrenches together. I'll get that on film here. How I did that. Gives you a little more leverage. We'll bolt. And there's two bolts that hold this caliper on. They are both 13 millimeter. See if I can get you where you see what I'm doing here. Have a wrench, take the box in, put it around like so. That gives you extra leverage. And you always, if you're using that method with the mallet, which I don't recommend, use a wrench properly. But if you happen to do it that way, make sure that your wrench is the right size and that it is fully on the head of the bolt. If not, you'll strip it out and then you got bigger problems. Alright, that's both of them. I'm gonna get a piece of wire and hang this caliper out of the way. It's a piece of wire here, and I'm gonna just double this wire up. Run it through the top hole where the top bolt for the caliper came out of. I'm just going to run this through here. That way it's doubled up, it's strong. I'll run it back through the loop I made. Doesn't have to be perfect, guys. But now I'll take the caliper off and gently set it out of the way. Show you guys how I'm doing this. Ran the wire through the top bolt hole and just tying it around just like that. And this is held out of the way pretty good. You want to be careful about your hose. You don't want to be kinking it really bad. That doesn't look like it's going to put it in much peril there, so I'll leave it that way. Now, another thing that's different on the front ones compared to the back, or the brake pads come off this way now, and sometimes they're hard to get off. But there's your front one, or your outside front brake pad. want you to notice how it looks. It's just kind of plain, right? Pull the inside one off. Notice it has 2 humps. Try to get it where you can see them. That's going to be your inside brake pad. Kind of little half moons. That's the inside. Alright, here's the fun part. Getting these big bolts off of this bracket, because this, unlike the back, the bracket comes around the front of the rotor, so the bracket does actually have to come off in order to change the rotor on the front. Kind of makes the job a little harder. Not the biggest fan of that, but it is what it is, and we work with it. All right, making sure the ratchet is going in the proper direction, making sure this is a 13/16 socket on a good Craftsman ratchet. Making sure that you have the ratchet in the loosening position. These things are on there tight, guys. I believe the torque specs on these are 180 foot-pounds. Very tight. And they have some type of Loctite on them as well, so. Alright, I've got that loose. I'm not going to take it completely out yet. Let's get this bottom one on. You want to make sure that your ratchet is completely engaged with the socket and that the socket's completely on the bolt head. It's important. See? You gotta have it on there. You don't want anything slipping off. You know, if you have an air wrench, you see I have an impact, but getting in here on these with an impact, it's just, I just can't do it unless I have the wheels turned. And I really don't want to do this process with the wheels turned if I can avoid it. So this is why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. There we go. Now, having a little progress here. We'll just get these bolts out. Pretty big bolts. I will be putting Loctite back on them when I put them back on. I will clean the threads out with a little wire brush before I do that. You can kind of see the remnants of some thread locker on there. I'll be using thread locker medium blue. I like the paste. That's what I'll be using to put it back together. And my torque wrench only goes to 150 pounds, so I'll have to get inventive, so I'm not even going to show that on the torque sequence on this particular one, because my way of doing it's not going to be exact. So, and I don't want to be showing you guys stuff like that. So, all right, the brake bracket, what I like to do just to help keep confusion down, see how this is coming off. I want to mark this. You really can't mess it up, but I'll mark this top like this. Just scratch it just a little bit so I know that that goes to the top. This makes my life a little easier. We'll pull these pins out and grease them in just a second. Before we do that, we're going to try to start working on the beginnings of getting this, getting this rotor off. And these things are beefy, heavy. And you can see where the rust is on these things. They get so much heat that this hub part here, it just makes it difficult. I have a little pick here. You hit this thing with a hammer like I'm going to do, this rotor is going to be no good. It'll warp it. It can really mess it up. So, you're kind of committed once you make that move. So we'll shoot that with some brake parts cleaner. which has gone up expensive. I mean, I can't hardly believe how expensive it's become, so that sucks. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'll let this air dry here a little bit. All right, guys, you see this guard here, right? Little metal guard. It goes all the way, pretty much all the way around, except for this area here where the bracket was, where we took the bracket off. Okay, the only place you can hit on this rotor to get it off is in this area. So I have the truck on jack stands and on a jack. The truck is in neutral. I have all of the tires blocked on the front and back, except for obviously the one I have off, to keep it from rolling, to keep it from going anywhere. It's very important that we do it that way. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to take some WD-40 and I'm going to spray it in here and try to loosen this up a little bit and give it a few more minutes, and then I'll take the hammer and start beating the crap out of it to get it off. But don't hit anywhere near this guard, because if you bend this, it's just going to make racket. It's going to be a mess for you. And getting that thing bent back properly is almost impossible. You can get it back where you don't have the noise anymore, but it kind of messes up the design of it. You don't want to do that. So that's what we're going to do now. That's the next step. All right, so I have WD-40 here. I don't know if I could speak correctly, WD-40. I'm just going to, I don't want to get it everywhere. And I'll let that sit for a couple minutes, and then I'll take the hammer and start beating it, and hopefully it'll come off without a lot of problems. If you can, without hitting your studs, and that's a big part of this, you don't want to be hitting your studs. You hit the studs with the hammer, you've just created yourself a whole new world of problems. I like to go around it. I'm going to turn the volume down pretty low here on the video for you guys, because this is going to be loud. But I will go around the face of this rotor several times, tapping it, trying to loosen up before I start really hitting on it. And the reason I have the vehicle in neutral is so I can actually spin this and get it into the same position that it needs to be in. And you see how stuck this thing is. I'm trying not to hit this caliper, but as you can see, it's giving me its own fight. I'm gonna tear anything up for sure. Wow. Whew, not good. I'm gonna beat on this thing a little longer. I'll be back with you if I ever get it off. After a lot of hitting, guys, whew, I finally got it off. I went back and sprayed the hub connection here again, and I took a little wire brush, went back around the edges, tried to clean as much off of it as I possibly could. But I had to hit on this thing quite a bit, guys. Whew, that was rough. But rotor's off. That's what I was talking about. You start beating on it with a hammer, you're kind of committed to following through. Let's see if you see that or not. Big chunk knocked out. Anyway, we're going to take the wire brush and we're going to clean up around here as much as I possibly can. I only have the Permatex aluminum anti-seize, which is really not the best for this from what I hear. What I understand is that it's better to use the copper. But I did look it up. I didn't see anything that said no way you can't do it. So that's what we're going to do. We'll clean all these threads on all these bolts, clean up all this, and then I'll be back with you. Basically just going to use a wire brush and clean all this surfaces and all that good stuff. It's going to take a little while to get all these clean, but we'll just stay at it with the wire brushes until we get it done. Little wire wheel. This stuff's been hard to get clean, so I'm not putting a lot of force on it. I'm actually trying to let the wire wheel do its thing. Don't want to mess up any threads. It looks pretty good. We're going to call that good. We'll grab the other one here. You can kind of see where it started. Could put my gloves on. Why don't I do that? You know me, safety third. She looks pretty clean, pretty good. Alright, I'm going to clean off the rest of this and then I'll be back with you. Alright guys, so I cleaned this off as good as I could get it. As you can see, it's dripping there. The brake parts cleaner. I sprayed everything down here a little bit. I'm going to take a paper towel and go around the threads on these studs, because during the process of beating the crap out of it, the anti-seize that was on the studs got a little trash in it, which is why I went ahead and sprayed it with the brake parts cleaner. I'm gonna probably put a little dab of anti-seize on those as well, and we'll get this thing slapped back together here. All right guys, I didn't get too crazy with it. Just a very, very, very light coat of anti-seize. Take a lug nut, we're going to put it on here, help hold that in place while we put the bracket and stuff back on, because it'll move. You'll think, oh, it's up there pretty good, and then you'll start trying to put the bracket on and the rotor will do what it wants, start falling apart and all that good stuff. So we don't like that. I tell you, that anti-seize will get everywhere. All right, bracket time. Well, kind of bracket time. We're going to work on the bracket. We're going to put some grease on these pins real quick, and then we'll put it all back together. All right, you see these pins? The rubber boot on it. We're going to pull that rubber boot off gently. You don't want to tear it because you got to reuse it unless you have some more. I don't. Pull the boot off. Pin looks really pretty decent. Just going to get a little grease and coat it up really good. Like so. Put the rubber piece back on, make sure it slides completely up. I will wipe all this down in just a minute. I like to put a pretty good glob on the end of it. I'll slide it back in and I'll pop it down. And yeah, you're gonna have excess here, and you do want to get this off because you don't want to get it on your brakes. And that's how I do it. I get it pretty clean. See how it's moving freely. All good. I'll do the same thing on this other one. Take the pin. Pull the rubber off without tearing it. Put some grease on it. Put a pretty good glob on the ends, just like that. Clean the grease off on my hands before I touch anything else, and then move on to the next step. Spray these bolts real quick. Make sure there's no major trash on them. You don't want to get the brake cleaner on your vehicle. It's corrosive. Alright. Put a little Loctite on here on these bolts. I like this gel, this paste. You don't want to get crazy with it. Whoa, that's more than enough. That's way too much. Way too much. Alright. Got a little coating on there. I don't get too crazy with it. Now, remember we marked the top so we'd know which one's which, right? Sure did. So I'm gonna look. It's this one. Try to get this thing put back on. Just want to line it up, start it by hand. You don't have to get it too tight. You need some movement so you can get the bottom one back in. Do the same thing here. I'm just about out of Loctite. I have just enough maybe to finish this. Being a little stubborn here. My hands are so. Gotta wipe them off a little more. A little bit of grease goes a long way. Alright, I just barely snugged that. And I do that so I don't put the other bolt in a jam. Alright, they're both snug. Like I said, I don't have a torque wrench that can go to 180 foot-pounds, and that is what's required here. So I'm going to turn the camera off and tighten this in my own personal way that I don't recommend. If you're going to do this, I suggest getting a torque wrench that'll hit the poundage that you need. I'll be right back after I get this tightened down, and then we'll put the brake caliper back on. Alright, now we're going to reload the brake shoes. Remember, and I'm going to take these gloves off because they have a little grease on them. I don't want to get any grease on any of these parts. Pretty easy to install. Remember the brake pad with the two humps goes to the inside, and sometimes it can be a little tougher to get on. There it is. You got it in place. We will unwire our caliper, being gentle and being sure not to drop it. Putting any extra stress on the line, we don't want that. Pull this back around. I was hoping I don't have to. It came off so easy. I was hoping I wouldn't have to push on the caliper, but I'm gonna have to, so I have to get be careful. Like I said, you don't want to drop this, you don't want any problems. Be sure not to kink this line. I'm gonna get my old brake pad, put it on here. I'm gonna get my C-clamp, and I'm gonna compress that down a little bit, hopefully. There we go. It's compressed. I don't know if you've seen the other video, you see I took the C-clamp, welded a castle nut on the end of it. It makes it a lot easier to use it instead of having to have a rod through the end of it. Could use an impact on it, but I tend not to, because it will bust that weld loose. But you can use a ratchet and a socket, and it makes life a lot easier. Especially if you don't have any extra set of hands, it's just yourself. It actually helps you a lot. That was the old one that fell off, guys. Nothing to worry about. There we go. We're getting there. They're lined up on the pin, and get our 13mm bolts started back in where they need to be, and we'll be well on our way to being done with this project. It's supposed to be 27 foot-pounds, I believe, for this truck. I'm going to put about 28, like the back. If I can find my torque wrench. Alright. Got that one. Torqued. Good to go. Everything is back on as it should be. That's all good. We can take this lug nut off now, and we should be good and ready to put the tire back on. I really need to torque everything again. Lugs on this particular vehicle are 150 foot-pounds, so you don't want to over torque them, but you don't want them loose. So I recommend using a torque wrench, even on your lug nuts. 150 foot-pounds. It's a good idea. All right, so I'm gonna get the tire back on, and we'll be done. That's how you do it. That's how I do it. So comments, questions below. Like I said, this is not a how-to video. This is a how I do it video. You're responsible for what you do. Be careful, be safe, all that good stuff. Hope you found it entertaining. If you don't mind, like and subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna take this thing for a test drive and bed the brakes, and we'll be done. Thanks for joining me, man. Appreciate it. I'm going to let the tire down just a little bit where it's just touching the ground where it won't spin. I'll hit it with the torque wrench, 150 foot-pounds, and we're done.